Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have an incredible guest on. I'm so excited to have this conversation. If you want more and more content from him and understanding of his philosophies and actually implementation of what he's going to be talking about in part as far as his profession and his career, go to his Instagram, go to his YouTube, go to his social media profile links. They're going to be at the bottom or like just underneath this episode, first thing on the show notes. So we want to make sure you have access to him. There's not no point. You're going to get a lot out of this podcast, but one of the desired points is for you to better understand how you can make progress in your own family's life and really set your family up for legacy type wealth, legacy type dynasty interaction, not just today, but long term in the future. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get into that, we're going to get to know Thomas as a human first, because that's more important, in my opinion, what leads somebody to want these types of solutions. So Thomas, I tried to scope you out as much as I could. One thing I couldn't find anywhere, and I'm not saying it's not there, I didn't consume like all of your content, frankly, but what's your backstory? Like, I want you to go back to your early childhood, explain your family dynamic, where you grew up, and what were some of the most impactful lessons that you learned from both your mother and your father?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sam. I would say from the time I was about 5 years old, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I say this so to countless people. I knew from that early age, I wanted to coach college football. So that's what I wanted to do. My dad was a high school football coach for 37 years. My mom was in education as well. So I grew up in that middle class ecosystem. Parents got divorced in middle school where we didn't want for anything, meaning we weren't, but we lived in the middle class cycle of parents typically didn't have bukus of money, but what they did is they lived off of debt, meaning they lived off credit card debt, things like that. And so I always remember hearing my parents argue about money. And so I thought to myself, man, I never want to do that. I never want to have to worry about anything financially. I grew up wanting to be a football coach, but I wanted to coach in college. So when I got done playing football, I tried to get a college job, could not get a college job. Did high school football for a little bit. And then finally getting off the plane from my honeymoon, got a college job offer, which is crazy. So we moved as soon as we got married, got into college football, was in that business for about 10 years. And honestly, Sam, this is really difficult to explain. I loved what I did, but I felt the Lord leading us in another direction. Did not know what that was. I loved what I did. My wife loved what I did, even though I worked a lot. She enjoyed me being in that world because she is also in that world, still is. And so getting out of that was a little bit like I hate to say this, we're a little anxious, took a huge pay cut and started working at church. And then from there, I started doing meal plans on the side for people. Now, this is back in 2013 when meal plans weren't really a thing. And so we did that for a while. It was at the church for about 2 years. And then after that, I went out, I hate to say, quote, on my own and was self-employed from that point on. And since that point, I've owned my own business. And it's morphed into so many different things, Sam, over the last, Lord, I guess 12 or 13 years. And it's been a great journey. Enjoyed every minute of it. Worked really hard in a lot of it, but it's given our family a lot more advantages in so many ways than I had, 15 years ago.
Sure. So where are you at as far as siblings? Are you an only child or you have brothers and sisters?
I'm the oldest of two. So I've got a sister that's 3 years younger, and she's a school teacher in Florida. And we live in Birmingham, Alabama.
I knew it was somewhere south, listening to your accent.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So oldest of two, what was that like when you're 5, 6, 7 years old? The awareness, when did you start becoming aware that you were an oldest child, and what were the implications of being an oldest? What type of protection mindset did you establish? What types of things did you establish? Hey, this is important. I've got a role here. I'm the oldest child, and what that meant.
Pretty quickly, we were latchkey kids in the fact that, not a negative term, just got off the bus in the afternoon, went home, we had a key, we were at home by ourselves for a while. And did I have to, quote unquote, take care of my sister? No, but yes. I mean, obviously I hate to say it like this, in charge, but I was in charge because I was 3 years older. And so I guess the responsibility part of being the eldest of the two kids, I guess that's probably when I first realized that. I've never had that question asked before. It's a great question.
If you're going into grade school, I mean, for her to be in school too, she's 5, you're now 8, 9 years old, or
something like that. Yeah.
And latchkey, what were your parents doing for work at that period of time?
So Dad was a football coach for 27 years in Alabama and 10 more years in Georgia. And so he'd go to school and teach, and then he would go to the stadium in the afternoon and he'd coach football. And even in the off season, there was always things to do in the afternoon. And then my mom was a librarian. She was a math teacher for a while, then was a librarian. So she was a librarian in an elementary school. And so she didn't get home until, call it 4:30. We got home at 3:30, probably 3:30. And then we were home for an hour. So they were coming home from school but we got there quicker because they were across town.
Okay. Outside of the financial arguments, because it sounds like what time in your life do you feel like you started to hear those interactions?
Middle school.
10, 12, 13 years old?
Yeah, 12, 13 years old, middle school. I remember hearing them arguing about money a lot. The cards, Sears. I remember Sears. I don't know if you know the old retail store Sears. We used to stop there, shop there. We shopped at Macy's. My parents always bought. We always had nice clothes. I think they did that debt because my parents weren't bonus kids and they didn't get bonuses and things like that. So we always went school shopping. We had nicer clothes, and I didn't understand the financial part. Didn't understand how much my parents made, but I just knew from hearing their conversations that I knew what credit cards were, if that makes sense. And I knew that like we had debt on credit cards because that was a topic of conversation that they always talked about. I remember thinking to myself, man, this ain't good. If they're arguing about it because of these reasons. Now, my wife and I discuss money all the time. And do we have arguments about money? Yes, sure. Everybody, I think, does, but we don't have arguments in the fact of like, we don't have money. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, I think that also, and I don't know your experience. Part of this is having this dialogue. I was asked just 2 days ago, because I was having a conversation with somebody I'm leading and mentoring in their relationship. And after, talking through, I was on the phone with both of them. And the wife asked me, hey, do you ever let your wife win an argument? And it's an interesting question. It's like, well, the first question is like on the surface level, the answer is yes, right? My wife wins tons of quote unquote arguments. But the actual answer to that, and I said this as well, is my wife and I don't argue, because at the moment I recognize that somebody has an emotional desire to be right more than to identify a path forward. I'm done. Like, I don't have a conversation with you when I've decided that you are more interested in being right than finding a solution or path forward. So the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm curious for you. Would you say you guys have arguments about money, or is it more searching for solutions about how to move forward? Because they can sometimes sound the same. You can both have passionate opinions and have beliefs about something, and it's fine to have opposing beliefs. The question comes in, are you more attached to being right and have the other person believe that you're right about your belief, or are you working on the same side of the table, working towards a similar end and goal? So I'm curious, in your relationship, not just about money, but anything, do you find yourself having arguments with your spouse or people in general, or have you learned to master really only engaging in conversations that are moving forward to a desired end?
Do we argue? Yeah, we do. Do I ever think that she just wants to be right? No. I think my wife has a desire to be right. She hates being wrong, self-admittedly. But do I ever think that she argues just to be right? Absolutely not. She has a thought and a set of beliefs that she believes is the correct thing. And she's, I said, like dies on that hill. Like she thinks that this thing. Now, let me say this. If I bring up a valid point about how that thought or whatever may not be true, she will admit that. We both apologize in discussion/arguments. She's done it. I've done it. We do it. But do I think that either one of us just want to be right? I mean, I don't really think so. I mean, she's in the other room. I mean, we could probably ask her, but yeah,
So let's move that on then, not just between you and your wife, because that's a very interpersonal relationship, but let's expand this question out farther. Do you find and I think none of us are immune from it. I find it in myself sometimes where I'm like, I just want you to know that I know what I know, And so I think this is a human reaction. It's not anybody listening to this hopefully understands we're not here to pick on anybody. We're here to dissect our own brains and understand how we can get better. At least that's my purpose. I want to find out what are the questions that we can lead from. So for you in your interpersonal relationship, where do you feel like you learned or decided? Because there's a lot of people out there who have not yet decided that the solution is more important, and your love and connection with the person you're working on the same team with is more important than being right. So where do you feel like you picked up that awareness that, you know what, maybe we should just be on the same team rather than operating against each other?
As you're asking that question, the first thing that pops in my mind is it's most likely a spiritual component. This sounds really corny, but like it's really true. Like, how would Jesus handle this situation? And I don't always filter every discussion with that, but we probably should. But how would Jesus answer this situation? How would Jesus want us to handle this situation? Obviously, the center of everything that he did was love. Center of everything he did was listening. Center of everything he did was understanding. So I try to teach my kids to be a better listener than a talker. No one ever said, man, he's such a good talker. They always say, gosh, so-and-so is a good listener, man. They just did listen really well. Well, I'd really like to be that, but everyone in this household at some point interrupts the other person when they're talking. And so getting number one is us all not doing that. I'm as guilty as anyone of not interrupting someone so that we can fully listen. But I think that thing is filtered spiritually. What is my spiritual makeup? What is my spiritual background? What are my spiritual beliefs? And how does that dictate how I discuss/argue? Because let me tell you something. Some people are vehement arguers. They get super excited, super mad, super loud, whatever. And we all try not to be that way. But sometimes we sometimes go there.
Yeah, and what's funny is, I mean, I've lots of people in my life that they're all different, and I just stay away from people who are too passionate. I think if they get too passionate about any one subject, I'm just like, nah, I'm not engaging. I don't know how to disengage, but I'm just like, I'm not going to engage because I don't care. Like, I really don't care about letting people passionately know that my opinion is firm. I just think, okay, that's good. So like, you want to be right. Now what? Did we move forward in our parenting style? Did we move forward in our relationship? So that comes from something though. And I know it came from something for me, right? I'm a product of my childhood. And sometimes we learn great things from our parents. Sometimes we learn things like, oh man, I definitely don't ever want to be or do that. So I'm going to avoid that. So I'm curious, were you raised with a spiritual background?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were, but did you see that those same principles carried through into your parents' relationship? So it can't purely be a spirit. It was a decision at some point. It was either an awareness or a decision that you decided to do it differently than your parents, even though religiously maybe you stayed the same.
So reframe that in a direct question for me so that I can make sure I'm answered correctly.
So I want to know, what was the instance that you decided to respond in a faithful way in an argument rather than being right? Because your parents chose a different path and you witnessed that path in your childhood. So what was the moment? When did you decide, I'm not going to do it how my parents did it, or I'm going to have a different way? I don't know what the decision was. And that's what I'm kind of digging for, is what was that? Where were you at? What was the time in your life? I could tell you the time, the day, well, maybe not the day, but what my surrounding was, where the room was, what was going on specifically, that I made a decision in my life I was going to behave differently. And I can tell you in vivid detail the exact experience. So I want to know, what was your experience?
I can't go back to a day or time. I think that it has slowly gotten better over time. I grew as much during my college years spiritually as I did any time. But I also married a wife that had a tremendous spiritual background. And I will credit her in her more of a charismatic, spirit-filled, what we call spirit-filled background, as to trying to be led by what the Lord would have us to do, trying to, as we say, be led by the Holy Spirit. Because my mom is wonderful. And my mom still plays the organ in the Baptist church today, and she's 77. But that was never a topic of conversation in my home. That was never a topic of conversation of like
faith in general was never a topic of conversation.
Faith was a topic, but the deep spiritual faithfulness that we now have in our home, as opposed to what I grew up in, it was totally different. My parents were great parents. They loved Jesus, but it wasn't an outward expression of who they are. They didn't say, "Oh God, I felt like the Lord told me to say this." I never heard that growing up. Whereas my wife did all the time. And so I grew a ton spiritually during college. But I also, when I got married at 25, had a wife that was a pretty big part of her life. Well, we started at a different church when I was out of high school, not in my mom's church. And then also meeting her, that journey, I'm going to be honest with you, that journey shaped me. Now, having a great spiritual upbringing and the basis and a background of understanding the Bible and being in that Christian world was wonderful. But the more spirit-filled decision-making was shaped, I would say, college, first part of my marriage. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I appreciate that. I'm going to ask more questions there. So do you feel like when you were looking for a spouse, somebody you were going to spend the rest of your life with, build a future, a significant future, was that one of the things you were looking for in your relationship, that you wanted somebody who was spiritual? And maybe it wasn't something you were looking for, but did you at least acknowledge that it was there and different than how you were raised before you got married, or was something you discovered after?
It was a prerequisite. Now, I knew that I wanted to have someone that loved Jesus vehemently. Okay. My mom was, I would say, probably the spiritual leader in our home, but my dad battled addiction. And so not seeing a spiritual tilt in his life, they were in some ways unequally yoked. I wouldn't say that my dad didn't understand and know Jesus. I wouldn't say that at all, because I know that he did. But like, there was a very stark difference in their thoughts and not opinions on going to church and things like that. But there wasn't a lining up of their their spiritual beliefs as far as daily practices and things like that. As I grew, when I got through college, I realized that I wanted a wife that loved Jesus and that we were on the same stage spiritually. And
Is there
I mean, I
an
dated.
experience
Go
that
ahead.
comes to mind in college that you saw even more of a contrast of what life would look like if that wasn't fulfilled for you, and so that was an intentional choice? What was going on in college that drove that even farther home? Like, man, this is really important to me. Not just like, okay, my mom and dad's, they struggled through, they made it. We're alive. I'm a good kid. We're okay.
I think when I dated girls in college that weren't as strong spiritually, there was a little bit of a gap. I realized I didn't want that gap as much. I wanted someone that we could agree on where we stand from a spirit filled perspective. Because I dated people in college that they just weren't there, and there was something different about them. Like, I liked them and they were great people, but the question is this: can I see myself raising kids with that human being where we differ in a spiritual component? And when you ask that question, and I guess this is part of what you're getting to, when you ask that question, the funnel goes like this.
Exactly. There you go.
And
So
so I
that's
guess that,
one of the questions of this show. Say it again so it resonates with them. But that's really what we're looking for. What are these questions that demand an answer? And once you ask that question and you find the answer, there's no looking back. It clarifies your life fast. It
very
takes
fast.
what is a little confusing to, no, this is truth, very quickly, because you can't unsee what you saw. And so I want restate the question there, because I think this is important for people. This is a question everybody should ask themselves, and keep asking yourself. Even if you're married, keep asking this question.
Yep. I think the question, I think what you're referring to is could I see myself raising kids and having kids with this human being from a spiritual perspective? I'll give you a great example. We have a 17-year-old, and she's wonderful, loves Jesus, and she's not dating at this point. And there are people in her ecosystem to where there's this couple that in the school, one is Catholic and one is Mormon. They're both great human beings. But the difference in spiritual thoughts and spiritual activity in the two is absolutely astronomically totally different. A Mormon parent and a Catholic parent. Are they great people? Yeah. But like, being able to raise those humans, if they have kids one day, being able to raise those kids the same is probably going to be pretty difficult.
There's a philosophy that like what goes through you sticks to you. You're the average of the 5 people who you're around. How do you see as a parent? I mean, she's 17. She's basically an adult at this point, in my opinion. She has her own life. She can do whatever she wants. How do you, as a father, kind of influence or guide or counsel? Like, what are the things you counsel your daughter with to help her determine, hey, who do I want to spend more time with out of this friend group? How do I, like, if I'm around this type of relationship, I might start to be okay with that type of mismatch in things and say, oh, it's going to be okay, rather than saying, you know what, that's not okay. I want to be surrounding myself with people who are equally yoked. And how do I detect that and look for that? Because you see it as a discerning father who's lived a life. Does she see it as a discerning daughter who's just getting started? And how do you help her see?
I think for right now, what we direct her on is who are the best people for her to be around, whether they're Catholic or whether they're Mormon or whether they're whatever. Who are the people that are going to make her better at life? Now, obviously, there's a spiritual component there of like there's some beliefs there, but like we want our kids around hardworking, morally correct, kind humans. It's not just those 3 monikers, but those are things that are very, very important. Obviously, we want them to be respectful as well. Kids come over, boys, girls, whatever, check our hands, looks in the eye, all those different types of things. So as far as from a friendships perspective, I could care less. I want her to be around, I don't care if they're Mormon or Catholic or whatever, I want her to be around great human beings because the everyday qualities will rub off on them. Now, if there's a, Bible-toting, spirit-filled friend out there, Lord, yeah, I'd love for her to be involved with that person as well. But if we don't really put limits on things like that, because
have you had instances? I don't know. Do you have multiple children or just one daughter?
Yeah, I've got 3, 17, 14, and 10. Yep.
So this is something that's happening at different ages, and you're dealing with teenagers at this point who are still trying to decide who they're going to be and how they're going to be and all of that. What level do you, as a father, say, you know what, we're going to allow this person into our home, even though he or she, whatever, they maybe are not right where we want them to be, but we believe that if they are in our home, we can have a positive influence on their life. versus, that person we're not going to condemn them as being bad and wrong, but we have to protect our space and we're not going to let that in our house, in our friend group. So how do you manage that? And where do you, there's probably not one hard line that you draw, but I'm curious, again, as a father who's a few years behind you, who I'm going to have to experience this. I'm already experiencing it where I'm like, hey, bro, don't associate with that kid at school. He's not helping you become who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
We've got a list of who we are as Knickerbockers. And do you see his behavior adding or subtracting here? Like, I'm already having this conversation with my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old.
Absolutely.
Because I'm seeing these behaviors. So how do you determine, hey, who are we going to allow over to our house and who are we not going to allow over to our house based on their behaviors and what you believe the environment you're creating in your house has the ability to influence and bring somebody up versus bring the house down?
Okay, so that's a great question. So we do not limit anyone that wants to come over here. If those kids, if my daughter, the kids want to come over here and hang out, we want to create a space where people enjoy being. We got a pool, got a cool backyard area. We're in a cul-de-sac. We got a cool spot. So we want kids to be over here, no matter what their high spiritual beliefs, low spiritual beliefs. Because my wife and I both believe that we could influence people in a positive way, whether it be boys or girls or whoever. That is a must for our home. We want people in the home. So we don't say, well, this guy doesn't understand and know Jesus, we don't want him here. Absolutely
What about not from a spiritual perspective, but just from lifestyle choices, attitude, orientation, respect, all those things? Like, because the reason I'm asking this is when we started this conversation down the faith path, it really came down to how do we deal with disagreements or interactions interpersonally with our spouse. And you said, well, it kind of goes back to our faith. So if people are displaying a certain type of behavior, not always, but there's a potential that they don't have a faith. And so they're just nihilistic. And that's not an accusation. It's a reality. And we have to be aware of that reality, whether you were raised in an religious home or non-religious home. You could end up religious or non-religious. So it's not always like, oh, the family's good, so they're going to be good. That doesn't mean anything. Unfortunately, with social media and life. So let's take the spiritual component just off to the side for a second. How do you determine who's allowed respect-wise, behavior-wise, interaction-wise, or have you not really faced it because your children are kind of filtering that before based off who they're inviting over?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we've faced it yet, but I don't know that me or my wife, either one, would be opposed to anyone coming over here that my daughter would want to have over here. We believe that we can help influence anyone in a positive way. We don't put limits out. You don't need to have them over at our house. I don't know that we've ever said that. I mean, I don't know that we've ever said that. I don't know that we ever will say that. Because that's not who we are. We don't really have any limits of like, hey, this person can or can't come over, because we love our home and we know that our kids are going to choose great friends. And we know that our kids, if they are choosing someone to come over here, do they need this environment? Do they need a loving 2-parent home, Christian spirit-filled environment? Because you never know what someone's going to see and that they may think, man, this is awesome. And they want to be a part of it more. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's perfect. So in the reverse, have you found yourself saying, hey, maybe don't go over to their house? They're welcome to come over here, but I don't want you necessarily going over there. Is there any of those interactions?
Absolutely. Yeah, no. So like we typically will not allow our kids to be over at someone else's house that we don't know. My wife's got this saying, and I've heard her say it 1,000 times, whatever it is, it always happens at someone else's house. We are very, very, hate to say the word strict, but we're very, very cautious about where our kids go. Because if we don't know the human beings that are running that home, we don't want them in that home, because we don't know what that home is like. No matter what the kid is like, we don't know the home. So we're very, very cautious. Now, the older they get, the more leeway there is, I feel like. A 17-year-old, one of her best friends is a girl here in town. We don't know the parents that well. I got a 17-year-old daughter that is, I trust her. And so we're fine if she goes in that home, as long as, the parents are there and things like that. But as far as our 14-year-old and our 10-year-old, hey, bro, we got to know who those people are if our kids are going to go inside their houses.
Cool. No, I really appreciate that, because I think that this all ties into the broader conversation of both how we interact and how we make decisions, and that they're spirit-led decisions for you, and how those are building into this who Thomas is. Because who Thomas is how you make decisions. It's how you make recommendations. It's how you interact with people. It's how if you believe something is good for somebody because of who you are, and you have your own sense of morality and what's right and wrong, that leads to a certain level of trust. Obviously, everybody should trust it, verify themselves, and it's great to trust, but verify always in
Yeah,
any
yeah, sure.
situation, whether that's in relationships, whether that's in the town you live in, anything. However, the more that somebody knows, right? If you know a family, you're more willing to let somebody go and be influenced by them, your own
Yeah.
child. Whereas if you don't know, then maybe proceed cautiously. And that's one of the things I want people to know who Thomas is. I want them to know kind of what your background is, why you do what you do, and what led you to that. So you're in college football. You decided that as a young age. You finally get into college football, an offer. How long were you in college football, and what was that? What were the things that started to happen spiritually, maybe in your life, that you're like, you know what? As much fun as this is, it's not my calling. Because that's an
Yeah.
important. Like, what was the question that started to pop up in your mind? Because there's a lot of people who are in these careers that they fell into, or they just like got into out of college just because they went to school for it, maybe, but still they're just there, but they don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like it's their calling, but they don't know how to get out, and they don't know what question to ask themselves
Yeah.
to make getting out a necessity, even if it's hard, even if you might struggle for another 2 years to find what really is meaningful. At some point, the draw of a calling has to be more than the comfort of complacency. And so what was that for you as you're going through college football and experiencing this, that you decided, change has to be made today?
That's a great, great question. And I think I can answer that question. We had our second child, one of the last games of the season, and went through the off season. So we had a 3 or 4 year old. I can't remember the exact. I want to say 3-year-old. And then we had our son, and we went through a season with having having 2 humans. And probably 5 or 6 months before the season started, my heart started to change a little bit. And I don't really know what happened. I honestly don't really know what happened. I knew that I was going to have to start spending more time with my kids, because in coaching college football, you work a lot. I mean, you're in the season, you're 75-ish hours a week. Then you're gone all of December and most of January recruiting. And this is back when I was in this stage. And so you're looking at 6 or 7 months a year where you're gone a lot. And then you're looking at being gone most of May because you're May recruiting. And so I just knew that me being gone 7 or 8 months a year was not a thing, because I wanted to be around with my kids.
And was that desire to be around with your kids partially because of what you experienced with your dad not being around as much as you wanted him to be?
No, I agree. I totally think that that's part of what it was, because my dad wasn't around a ton when I was a kid, because he was coaching all the time. Good coach, very, very progressive in what he did. So I think that me being around from that perspective was important to me, because I also saw, Sam, the path that I was going on. Also saw that that wasn't going to let up, meaning I was going to continue to work this amount of hours. And if we wanted to continue to have more kids, then I needed to be around them, because I wanted to raise my kids. I saw that the path I was going around, I was not going to be present. And so I decided to get out. It was a gradual, because I want to say in May before the season, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because I just think my heart was changing. And then we get through the season, we get about 4 games in, and I just looked at the head coach and I was like, hey, I'm done, coach. I walked in to my wife and said, hey, this is it. This is the last season. And this was like late September. And so I knew that I was going to be done. I went in to my boss and I just told him, I said, hey, I'm done, coach. And he goes, what are you going to do? And I said, I really don't know. I just know that this is not it. So oddly enough, I quit without having a job.
And did you finish that season eventually?
Yeah.
So you did.
I just looked at him and said, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. I said, let's get through the season. I still, I'm going to bust my butt. I'm going to do my job. I'm still going to recruit kids. But I said, December 3rd, that's a clean break for everybody. I said, let's get through the end of the year. At that point, we'll go. And he said, sounds good. If I can help you in any way, let me know. And so I went through the rest of the season, no ill will, no nothing. And it was great. I mean, it was really, really good.
I want to ask another question here about this time with you and your wife. How aware were you letting her in on this change of heart? Did it kind of seem
every step of the way?
Okay, so it wasn't like out of the blue that it was, hey, I'm done today, like it was for your coach maybe, but for her it was like, okay, when do we actually make this transition? She was aware of the whole thing.
Yeah. No, she knew totally. And one of the things we did growing up from a financial perspective is, again, I told you this before, I vowed never to argue about money. And so we were very, very tight financially. We were Dave Ramsey disciples for a long, long time, tried to live below our means, paid cash for cars, all that kind of stuff. And so from a financial standpoint, we didn't have bukus of debt. We owed on our house, and that was really it. We were in a place where we could limit ourselves financially and still be fine. Now, it was going to be tight, but we could do it. And so I wasn't worried about that. I knew that I was probably going to have to take a step backwards financially. And I did. Took a massive step backwards. But here's the problem. I did not know what I was going to do. Like from the time I was born, all I'd ever done was football. And I looked at my dad who'd been in football for 37 years and I go, I don't know if I can do anything else. He looks at me and goes, son, you can do anything you want to. And that was encouraging because he at first was a little hesitant about me wanting to get out because he loved it, but he also knew that that's all I ever done. But then I didn't realize this until probably 10 years later, Sam. The skills that I created while coaching college football, it was a cheat code for owning my own business, communicating in sales. It was cheating. But what I learned in that 10-ish years, it is an experience I would never take back because I learned so much about everything that I do today. The skills that I made in those 10 years were just compressed into a small amount of time. It was probably 25 years of experience because I worked so much, but it was compressed in such a small amount of time that it helped me so dramatically in what I do.
Well, and what's funny about that is oftentimes people enter a new industry and they'll experience a lot of success quickly. And then people are like, oh, it's a get rich quick thing. It's like, no, I spent years developing me as a person. And then I took all of those same skills and I applied them to a different industry that has a different pay scale. It's not get rich quick. It's a different pay scale. I'm reusing the same years of experience that God prepared me with, and I'm applying it in a slightly different avenue. It's still education. It's still mentorship. It's still coaching. It's still helping somebody believe that more could be achieved than their current performance. All of that's still the same, optimization, all that. But now I'm doing it in an industry that has a different pay scale. And if we can help people realize that, whether they're a school teacher, whether they're cleaning cars, whatever they're doing, hey, what skills am I learning in this industry that if I were to apply them to a different industry with a different pay scale, the money problems would go away instantly? Because there's a lot of great teachers out there.
That is the best explanation I've ever heard. That was so good. And I've never thought of it that way, but that was so good. You need to package that up and sell that.
That was really, really good. For you. I'm selling Thomas.
Thank you. Thomas. But the way you explained that was really, really good. And I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it as a quote different pay scale. The same set of skills and on a different pay scale. That's great.
Yeah. Well, that's all it is. And I just think like that's amazing for you, but everybody else that you meet, how are they doing it? But then for you, you probably had to do this in football all the time. And this is again where I don't know nothing about football. I watch it. I'm like, okay, I hope the ball goes over there. Then they change the rules. I'm like, why are they calling that? I don't know what's targeting, what's not targeting. That looked like a foul. I wouldn't want to get hit that way. I mean, I'm pretty oblivious, right? But I know well, one of my friends, Matt Gay, who maybe you know who Matt Gay is, he was out of Utah football.
Yeah.
He was a soccer player before at UVU. And then some friend convinced him to go be the kicker for Utah football. He kicked there for 2 seasons, got some contract, and then he's been in the NFL since, right? But it's like he was a soccer player. He wasn't a football player. But somebody said, hey, I see your skill. I see the ability to target with your foot. How about we go apply that in a different capacity that has a way better pay scale if you get drafted than a soccer player? Soccer player pay scale, not that great. A great 90% kicker in an NFL team, pretty
massive pay scale.
Okay.
That's good.
Difference of millions of dollars. So how about we just reposition your skill set into a skill set? My nephew, same thing. He was a great soccer player, moved into high school football, and best kicker. Some of the games that they played, he was the only one who scored points because he was a good kicker,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So, but you have to do this probably with running backs. You have to do this with all these different positions that I know nothing about. Say, hey, look, you're great on offense, but we need you on defense. You've got to switch sides. And you've got to use those same skill sets, your ability to see where the ball is going, your ability to know because you ran this route so many times, you know where that guy's going to be running.
Sure.
I need you to block him. End of story. So you are great. You already have an eye for repositioning skill set and helping the person believe in that repositioning. And that is, in my opinion, the work of God. Helping somebody see, hey, you may have been a Saul for a really, really long time. You may have been attacking for a really, really long time. If we could just reposition your zealotness, reposition your purpose, you could be one of the best people for us.
Yeah. Wow.